So, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with our G8 unit gathering here, the mega gathering. And today we're going to be talking about transits, how transits affect us, how transits should be read, and how much importance they have perhaps over dashas than just single-handedly, studying a transit. So we have this great gathering of new participants. Sunilee Jainpawar ji is here, Dhilip Kumar, Michael Reed, my main girl Joni Patry, Vic Dicara, Arjun Pai, Ryan Kurczak, my Sedona drinking partner, and Eve Menzoda. Welcome, guys.
Thanks, Kapiel.
Hello. Yes. So everybody is unmuted right now. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to give each participant 10 minutes to talk about transit, and then after that we're going to be having like a discussion like this, open discussion. So I'm going to put this stop clock from my phone so you guys can see it and the participant can see it. So just so you know why this 00 is here is because I'm going to be doing a clock like a game show type of thing. So since Sunilee ji is our brand new guest, so why don't we start with you, Sunilee ji? Tell us about transits and why they are important and how should they be read.
Okay, thank you, Kapil. Am I audible?
Yes.
Oh. So, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting for this great session. I am so glad to see all known faces. Always I used to say Joni and Eve. I have been in last session. So nice to see you, Dr. Arjun Pai, also Dhilip Kumar ji, Michael ji, everybody with Dicara. Thank you so very much. Okay. About Gochar, if we will talk, I simply tell Gochar is a Gochar Brahman is a present situation of the planetary position in the Akash Mandal, that is in the sky, whatever planetary position is at present, that becomes Gochar. When we were born, that was that time Gochar, and now today the child which will be born, that will become his or her today's Gochar, that is transit of planets. Now transit of planets plays very important role in our life because we are born with certain planetary position for forever or throughout our life. The planetary position is going to remain same. But why we are getting different events and different effects in spite of having the same planetary position in our chart? Still we are getting sad events also, we are getting happy events also, we are getting twists and turns in our life. So that all depends upon the transit of planets which is taking place from moon to bigger planets. Moon, because that is a everyday Chara planet. It is a movable planet. So every time it is going on moving and it is directly affecting our mind. That is why we always go on changing our thought process. We cannot become at the same thought. We can become firm because of the Surya Gochar. We can take a firm decision because of Surya Gochar, not because of Moon Gochar. Moon Gochar always gives us thoughts. Then we go to Mars Gochar, which gives us energy to take any decision. Then we go to Jupiter Gochar. At that time, what happens? The total strength of our Jupiter in our chart here plays very important role, even though present Jupiter is playing or is transiting over your 9th house or 5th house or any good houses. But until and unless your original Jupiter is not in good strength, you are not going to get the full benefit of that Jupiter. Why I am talking about Jupiter? Because Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu and Ketu, all these 4 planets are taking longer time to make a transit as compared to other planets. That is why we have to concentrate more on these 4 planets, which really plays very important role along with Mahadasha in our chart. If at all your Jupiter transit is very good going, even though Rahu transit also, so that time this Jupiter will behave like Rahu only. If your Rahu is in very good strength in your chart, then definitely good events will take place in your life. Now again here I strongly believe that Yoga Karaka planets for each and every Lagna plays very important role in transit, period. Because even though if you don't have Yoga Karaka planet, say for example Jupiter is not becoming Yoga Karaka planet or Saturn is not Yoga Karaka planet in your chart, or even though any other planets which are having only 29 days to 30 days Gochar Brahman in our charts. Unless and until they are Yog Karak, they are not able to fructify fully for us. So basic thing, what Laghu Parashari teaches us, basic things we must know before predicting any event for the native. Unless and until we know it, we cannot go further. Now, how Mahadasha is connected with this transit? Now, say for example, you are running Ketu Mahadasha. And at present, many people say from August Ketu is going to change. That is true, and mean notes many people follow as per Chaitra Ainansha or other Ainanshas. But it is going to take place during August or September. We can talk to that. So if Ketu is going to transit from Capricorn, so that time where the Jupiter will be very near to Libra sign, because Jupiter is going to enter within 4 days, means 12th of September, Jupiter is going to enter into Libra sign. So how this Jupiter and Ketu will play role, because they will be Kendra to each other. This Jupiter and Ketu will be 410 to each other in present Gochar in all of us chart. For everybody, this will be in Kendra for 18 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Jupiter will be not for 18 months. Rahu Ketu will be for 18 months. Jupiter will go ahead to Scorpio sign. Then they will become in Labha Yoga to each other. Now this Jupiter Ketu, now from Jupiter this Ketu will be 4th. And from Ketu this Jupiter will be 10th. So here everybody's professional life will be affected over here. Because 4th is our Sukhasthana, 10th is our profession. So if Ketu Mahadasha is running, Ketu will give his all strength to Jupiter here as per BPHS rule. Whenever any Mahadasha is taking place, the planet which is 10th from the Mahadasha Lord will give all his his strength to that particular planet. If it is there in your chart, 10th place. Otherwise, it will give its own fruits. But maximum fruits will be given to 10th placed planet. So here Jupiter will be playing the important role in person's professional life. Any changes of job will take place. Any new venture may get started. Spiritual progress may go in upper position. Many a times hindrance, or you have to go away from your motherland. You have to travel a lot for your profession. Now here you have to see that where is your Makar Rashi and where is your Tula Rashi in the chart. So again that Bhav Karakatva will also get affected along with professional aspect. That we have to see for all in general.
Makar and Tula, I mean Capricorn and Libra.
Yeah, Capricorn and Libra, right. So in our chart where these Rashis are placed, for everybody it will be placed in different sthanas as per the Lagna. So along with this professional life, again means all 10th house related matters and all Capricorn house related matter, all Karakatva will get affected and it will give fruits. Likewise, all transit planets we have to see. For each and every planet we can see same way. Okay, 8 minutes.
Yeah.
For all planets we have to see in same way. Now for Gochar, many people have the doubt that from where and how to see the Gochar planets. So I strongly say that Gochar has to be seen from Moon Rashi only, because Moon is a daily moving planet. So first we have to see transit from Chandra, then we have to see transit from your Lagna chart, then we have to see transit from your Surya Kundali. How we see the Sudarshan Kundali, same way we have to see the transit, and then we have to decide whichever is giving us best result, we have to take that chart for seeing the transit. We should not take all the three charts. If my Chandra Kundali is playing very strong role in giving the fruits, I will compare the events in past Mahadasha also. So I will take that chart only to see the Gochar. Then we have to see Surya Kundali. If you want to see Surya Kundali for name, fame, for your health issues, you have to see the transit from Surya Kundali. For taking any strong decisions in your life, we have to see this transit from the original planet. Say for example, we have to see the Mercury transit. So from original Mercury, now where is the present Mercury in the transit? So we have to decide accordingly. Then we have to see the Tarabal also. At present, Mercury is transiting in which nakshatra, and your original Mercury is in which nakshatra. How we see Janma, Sampat, Vipat, Shem, Pratyari. Likewise, we have to conclude the result if matter comes to the any paperwork issue particularly. Starting any new venture, starting any offices, communication, everything. We have to see each and every planet transit from the original planet placed in our chart. And for Saturn, I will say Saturn Rahu, here we have to see for our karmic account balance. How your Saturn is in original strength in your chart, same way this Saturn will be fructifying you in the transit of the Saturn. So Saturn here, what it will show, Saturn Rahu, all the karmic account where your Saturn will be placed from Rahu. From your natal Rahu, you have to see the present Saturn where it is placed. So it will definitely give you all the reminders that what things you have to do. Now here, I will advise each and everybody that when this Saturn will be entering in Capricorn, after say 1 year it is going to enter, 1.5 years. So that will be the most favorable period to do any spiritual activities for us, whoever are in occult. So that will be the most favorable period when this Saturn will be transiting from Capricorn sign.
Great.
So this was all about all the transit of planets.
Your screen just became very small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see me?
I don't know what happened, but it says your bandwidth is low. Well, thank you so much, Sunilee ji.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to Michael.
Well, thank you. I was trying to figure out what the best transit technique to talk about today was, because I thought that's how we were looking to approach it. And there's one particular transit technique that I like working with, and it's rather than teaching it, I thought I would show an example. Is it okay for me to share a screen here? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have my permission.
Okay. All right, let's kind of minimize that. Okay. I'm getting some echo from somebody's end.
You sound cosmic.
Yes,
Sounds
I know.
good.
Everyone's like,
Sounds
he
good.
wants to sound like God.
All right, it stopped now. There we go. There we go. It stopped now. Well, one of the things I like doing is using my dashas to narrow a predictive window, right? In other words, looking for planets that all have the same agenda. For this particular example, we're looking at a marriage date for somebody. And so we want all the planets that are connected to that particular event to all have an agenda for marriage. And in terms of that happening, for marriage, rather than just using the 7th house, which is obviously a relationship house, we also want to look at the 9th, because the 9th is committed relationships, relationships that have more purpose than other relationships might. And in addition to that, it signifies a relationship that has a legal connection to it. So for that, we would have the sun, because the sun, and I tend to work with house cusp, which is why you see these numbers here. The sun rules the 9th cusp. So the sun obviously has a relationship agenda. As we can see, we're in sun dasha with this person. Venus obviously is the natural karaka for relationships. So Venus has a relationship agenda. When we look at the Navamsha chart, as we're going to try to do here, Rahu is placed in the 5th from Venus, which is the Bhavam position from the 9th house. So Rahu has a relationship agenda. When we go and we look at Jupiter here in this position, we can see Jupiter rules the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th position from Saturn. So Jupiter has a relationship agenda, and we already looked at Rahu. So all of these planets have a relationship agenda. Then I like looking for something that's called Jaimini's second source of strength, which basically involves having Jupiter, Mercury, or the Lord of a particular Rashi. In this particular instance, either the Lord of the 7th, which would be Mercury, or the Lord of the 9th, which would be the Sun, either transiting a sign or Rashi aspecting that sign. And that creates something that's called broad activation. So we're looking for a broader period of time within a particular dasha when an event can happen. And usually I start this particular technique by going down to the Prachantar dasha level and just checking the 3rd one down, because obviously in many cases you don't have a rectified birth time, so you're not really sure. And so if down to the Prachantar dasha Lord has a relationship agenda, I then start looking for broad activation. And to just kind of point it out in this particular chart, here we have Jupiter in Pisces, from where it will Rashi aspect Gemini, which holds the 7th cusp. So Jupiter is broadly aspecting relationship placement. Here we have Mercury up here in the 9th. Okay, so that's obviously got a relationship agenda. And the 9th Lord, the Sun, is transiting the 9th too. So as many of these factors as we can get, the stronger the event window becomes. So then we want to look for some factors from the Saptamsha. So we look at the 7th cusp Lord in the Saptamsha. That is Mercury. And here we have Mercury transiting the 9th, so that works. But let's look and see who's ruling Mercury and who's ruling the Sun here in the Saptamsha. And the Sun is ruled by the Moon. And here we see the Moon transiting Sagittarius, where it's Rashi aspecting the 7th. Okay, and Mercury's here in Venus's sign, and we've got Venus over here in Libra, where it's Rashi aspecting Leo. So really the strong events, the most powerful events, are going to have all of these factors lining up, maybe 1 or 2 missing.
So you're using Rashi aspects for transits.
Right now for this particular thing, this is just broad activation. We're not looking for exact transits yet. We're just looking for broad things. Yeah, we're trying to see if there's enough manifesting strength to create the event. But yes, Rashi aspects.
Okay.
So then we look at the 9th cusp Lord from the Navamsha, which is Venus. So Venus is lining up. Let's see who's ruling the Sun and Mercury. The Sun's in its own sign, so the Sun's there. And Mercury's Lord is Jupiter, and we know we have Jupiter. Then I like looking at the Shastyamsha, but we can't work with houses there. So all we can really do from the Shastyamsha is to see what Rashi the Sun is in. It's in Leo, so that adds an extra boost to it from looking at the Shastyamsha. And Mercury is in Venus's sign, so we have Mercury. So we've got every single factor. You don't have to have them all, but the more of them that you have, the more powerful it will become. Then I like to start looking for these things that are called trigger transits, which are what is kind of shown by these little lines here. And basically, the idea that is behind this is that when planets are in the same 3-degree, 20-minute section of sky, then they're forming a transit where an event can happen, right? And with some planets, that's 2 to 3 days.
Kakshaya slots?
Sorry?
Are these Kakshaya slots, or is it something different?
These are basically the same Navamsha, only they won't be in the same position in the Navamsha chart, just the same 3-degree, 20-minute section of sky. But when you look at Rashi aspects, you have to look at them differently. So trigger transits in terms of Rashi aspects are created when you have a planet, say for instance, 0 to 3 degrees, 20-minute of one sign will trigger a planet in 26, 40 to 30 of another. So you kind of take it in reverse here with Rashi aspects. So in other words, a planet in 320 to 640 will Rashi aspect something between 2320 to 2640. So that's what's creating these things. We don't need to go too deeply into that.
Okay.
But let's see if we've got something that's in place that can create on this day the marriage, which is actually when the event occurred. Well, you've got Venus here. Venus to Venus. Let's see who the Atmakaraka is here. So I usually like bringing this up.
So you know, Michael, I'm not understanding any of these charts because I only use the North Indian. So I'm just like,
oh, it's okay. It's a circular chart. It's a transit chart.
Yeah.
It's hard to do transit charts side by side with things like that. And I've noticed that a lot of software, a lot of Vedic astrology software will put a circular wheel in for the transit chart. And sometimes they can we can do this for everybody's benefit. Let's bring this up. There's a Rashi chart, and let's do this.
I still don't get it because I can't understand this.
Okay, that's the wrong day. Okay, all right.
But now go ahead because there are other people.
Okay, all right. So basically, Venus is the Atmakaraka here. And we've got an exact trigger transit between Venus and the natural Karaka for relationships, Venus. Okay. And we've got Jupiter as the Lagna Lord to the Sun. So we're seeing 2 Rashi aspects that are creating it. I'm not Rashi aspects, but Rashi chart aspects. Let's see if we've got something from the Navamsha chart lining up with it. And that's all we need to do to see if it's strong enough to create the event, especially with all those other factors. The 9th Lord here from the Navamsha is Venus. So you've got Venus, the 9th Lord, to Venus, the Karaka for relationships. And so when you've got all the dashas creating the same agenda, when you've got broad aspect by so many different factors lining up, and when you've got these trigger transits going on, you can use this technique to predict events down to within about 2 or 3 days worth of time. And it's a really powerful technique for predicting events. Yeah, by using transits. This is my favorite transit technique. And in order to fill in the blanks, a lot of times I will go over and I'll look at the Tara positions, right? And in addition to that, look at the Ishtaka Varga of the planet transiting it in order to understand a little bit more of the details of the event that's going on.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Michael.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay. So
let me stop sharing
the screen. Okay.
There we go.
All right. So do you guys see me right now as a main screen when I talk?
It'll be different on each person's end. Depending on how they have it set up. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna take like 4 minutes on the transit. The one thing that I want to say about transit, and I have to thank 2 people for this. One is actually present here in our meeting here, which is Ryan. Ryan made a video last year on relationships, and he said something so profound that I'm like, wow, that was the missing element in the transit. I'll give you an example of what Ryan was saying. You have Mars transiting the 4th house in Cancer. A debilitated Mars in the 4th house, let's say even receiving low Ashtak Varga points, will cause power struggles within the home, can cause havocs within the home, fights within the home, okay? And let's say this person is going through Rahu Mahadasha, which is in the sign of Scorpio. Anytime Mars comes in the 4th house, this person just cannot take dealing with the mother, dealing with things related to home. There's always things breaking up, electronics are failing, or whatever Mars Karkavastha does. But then Mars comes, okay? Mars comes back in the same sign of Cancer, but this person now switched from Rahu debilitated Mahadasha to now Jupiter Mahadasha, which is in the sign of Sagittarius. The same Mars comes, okay? And because the same Mars has come in the sign of Cancer, yet this person is going through a great Mahadasha. This person will not feel the same debilitation of Mars as they did when Rahu was transiting as the Mahadasha. That's why I'm like, wow, Ryan just made so much more sense as to why we think of our relationship as something so good when the Dasha is right, even though that planet is debilitated in our 7th house. But when the Dasha is wrong and that planet is exalted, Venus is exalted, we're still feeling like, I'm not there yet, okay? So that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I learned, which is from Sam Jappi, was that we should be studying transits from ascendant instead of moon because it is changing in 2.5 hours. So that is where the karma is unfolding. But then obviously, what I do is I study transit from moon and the ascendant. Why? Moon, as Sunilee ji said, it is gochara. It's gochar. It's not transit, it's gochar. It is prarabdha karma. Transit from the moon will trigger an event. Like you can say something about Saturn transiting, let's say, in the 6th house from the moon. But Saturn transiting 9th from the moon, it's something that we might be inclined to do it, but we may not do it. Saturn may make us disciplined towards our philosophy and religion. We may not pay attention to it. It's our own actions. But Saturn transiting 6th from the moon will definitely bring in some karmic debt, something related to the 6th house, which is you're going to have to face. Those are the difference that I've seen. Now, obviously, for me, like when I'm judging certain events, like especially, relationship, when will my relationship happen, I stopped using transits. I don't need to use transits for that. Why? Because I use something known as Padam Chakra, which is not Sudarshan Chakra. It is different concept where each house becomes active at a certain age. And you have to use 12-year blocks, like first 12 years ruled by moon, then Mercury, then Venus, then Sun, etc. I'm just using that for pretty much everything, and it just lines up. Like, okay, well, you must have had a relationship at 19, 23, 28, and then 31 will be your next. And then you can see the month. Whatever, let's say I'm 19 years old. I'm going through my 7th house is becoming active at 19. I make the 7th house the ascendant. From there, if I see Venus, let's say, sitting in the 7th house in a good position, I know at 19 a relationship happened. Which month it happened? Well, if you make 7th house the ascendant, use January as the 1st house, February as the 2nd house. So Venus is there in the 7th house, most likely. Whenever this person turned 19, let's say they turned 19 in August would be the month that will give them relationship. So for me, transit is something that is more on the prarabdha karma. Well, this is something's going to happen. Yes, you're going to get into accident at 19. But for me to look at your relationship, I'm not really looking at that. So that's my personal perspective on transit. So we'll move on to my main man, Ryan. Take it over, Ryan.
All right. Am I unmuted? Did I unmute my mic? All right. We good?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. Well, there's a lot to say about transits, and Kapiel, I'm surprised that you have time to listen to other people's videos when you do so much work on your own. So nice to know you're out there.
I do.
I wanted to take it a little bit different direction today, since I know we're going to hear a lot about different techniques and how to approach transits. And so what I would like to do is to speak about what exactly is happening when a transit occurs. And if we think about it, we know everyone has a different life path. Everyone experiences different things. Whereas you might be in a wonderful relationship, your best friend might be in a terrible relationship, or you might know someone who always has all the money that they need, but then your money comes and goes. It's hard to determine. But if we look at the birth chart, the moment that we're born, in a sense, stamps and imprints the potential experiences that we're going to have through life. Now, that's the static birth chart. And this is one of the reasons why, when it comes to things like transits and dashas, we have to be very specific to the individual's chart that we're looking at. Because, for example, your chart might not have a karma for divorce. Whereas every time a particular transit occurs in the sky and everyone's predicting you're going to have terrible relationships, you think to yourself, well, this isn't really affecting me. And you're thinking, well, astrology must not be very good then, because the astrologers are telling me everyone's going to have trouble with relationships. It's a bad time for relationships, yet it never affects me. And that's going to be because your chart doesn't hold that particular karma. So before we get into transit specifically, as I'm sure all of you know, we have to read the chart first and see what is the potential of that chart. And this is also one of the reasons why I think the practice of yoga and meditation, in a sense, can be so good for individuals. In fact, I just did a video, it'll come out tomorrow, on why you should listen to your heart more than astrology. And this came from quite a lengthy prayer meditation process that I personally have been going through, thinking about astrology and yoga and meditation. And it's important because if we identify with our birth chart, what we're going to do is we're going to find that most of those things in our birth chart are going to come to pass. But if we realize that that birth chart is an imprint of a particular trajectory, a particular way we were going, our soul was going the moment we were born, if we just let it happen on autopilot, sure, those things are going to occur. And people who are on autopilot, those are the easiest people to do predictions for. In the same way that if you know someone has a difficulty with anger and you stick them in a situation where someone's going to challenge them, you don't need astrology to predict that a fight's going to occur, because you know how the person reacts and responds. And so the birth chart is how a person reacts and responds. But what I find to be maybe a little more empowering and a little more helpful is to use the birth chart, to use astrology as a guide to know, this is what I started with. This is the collection of my karmas that I kind of put into play, that I engendered, that cosmic mind put together for me to experience in this life. But now I'm a conscious being. I know that if I start going in a different direction, if I start trying to do something differently, if I start wanting to experience something better than an abusive relationship, and this is what inspired that video I was talking about follow your heart more than astrology, that I can do that. It might be painful because maybe you don't know how to be in a good relationship. Maybe you don't know how to recognize people that can support you in your relationship. So you have to go through the process of extricating yourself from difficult relationships and be alone for a while and maybe get some counseling and figure out how to be in a healthy relationship. But if you start doing that, then every moment, every day, in a sense, becomes like a new birth. And that's why in some spiritual texts, they say it's good to die daily, because it's like it's resetting your patterns, your astrological patterns. And whereas yesterday, maybe you had a propensity to allow yourself to be abused in relationships, today, maybe you're going to try to stand up for yourself a little bit more. And then the next day, a little bit more. And maybe it takes 2 or 3 years before you can finally be strong within yourself, that debilitated Mars with Saturn in your 7th house isn't affecting you anymore. And you've, in a sense, reset your karma. And I think this is very important. It's hard to do, but it does require things like prayer and meditation. And, you know, from the, I guess, spiritual tradition that I mainly hail from, Kriya Yoga, Swami Sri Yukteswar would say things like, you need to access that state of grace such that that grace is more influential pouring through you into the world, rather than the world or those tendencies, those karmas, which are represented by the planets, to be pushing you around. That's sort of the process that we're aiming for. And I think astrology can be very good for self-knowledge, to give you ideas about your tendencies if you don't know what they are. But mostly, if we can start understanding that by trying to redirect our consciousness, by listening to our heart, then we can start to walk a different path. And then our chart becomes less influential as we move forward. You know, and I always use this example, and I've got plenty of examples, but this is a big one. When I was first learning astrology many years ago, a very world-renowned, all of you know him, told me that I probably would never get married and never be happy being married because of a particular situation in my chart.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, I'd already been married 5 years, and I had been with my wife a total of 8 years, and we're still married, and it's about 20 years later. Now, I understand why he said that, because my chart is kind of crunchy and cranky a little bit. But when I was younger, I became more interested in that I decided that I would not let that define who I am. I would try to let go of my anger. I would try to let go of, whatever family patterns might have been there. And I would try my best to be a good, supportive, loving person. And sure, I made a lot of mistakes, and I succumbed to Saturn and Ketu and Rahu and Mars and all these sorts of things. But as I moved through the process, I learned to navigate some of these difficulties to where the things that bothered me, say when I was 19, 20, or 25, that would cause me to ruin a relationship or to cause problems in my career, I don't do that anymore because I became aware of what astrology had to tell me about my tendencies. And then I could start to apply different ways of looking at it. Now, how much time do I have? Because I got one more thing I want to...
You have 1 more minute.
1 more minute, okay. All right. Well, gee, that just made my mind go blank. So basically, what we need to remember is that the planets are represented by the chakras. The signs are represented by the chakras. The reason we're pushed around, the reason we go on autopilot so many times is because when a planet moves through a sign, when a planet aspects another planet, it is triggering a pattern within our chakras. Through things like meditation, prayer, whatever it might be, if we can learn to become aware of those, then we can learn to not have them trigger transits in such a way that we have to act according to the planet, and we can start redirecting our life through our own God-given willpower, through our own capacity for surrender, through following our heart, versus being a mechanism of this universe. And the universe isn't even a mechanism. We understand it to be that way because that's how we like to think. If we push this button, therefore that'll happen. But if we can start to think that we have a little more freedom and we can be okay failing, we can be okay trying, we can eventually not necessarily be pushed around so much by transits, master our karma, master our chakras, and then be free. Which an understanding of the transits is useful, but it doesn't need to be the end-all, be-all definition of everything.
So. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So Vic, what do you got for us today?
Well, I love transits. Transits were the first thing about astrology that I actually understood. And when I say the first thing, I mean really like before I knew that Leo comes after Cancer. I just understood about transits because somebody told me that you'd be able to predict a person's future based on the position of the planets. And it made sense that, okay, the planets go into a certain position when you're born, but they keep moving. So if they mean something in a certain position when you're born, then as they move around, you can predict when they're going to come back to that same spot and how they're going to touch that spot again as they keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, aha, I see, maybe astrology is a reasonable thing. And then I figured out that Leo comes after Cancer and before Virgo.
Okay.
So let me just tell you how it works, how a transit works. I have a nice example for this. It's like if you have a sensitive point on your skin, which everybody has, at least one or two. And what a transit is when somebody touches it. That's what a transit is.
Okay.
So what is this sensitive point on your skin? That's your skin is your birth chart. Sensitive point is some kind of is a marker in that birth chart. Maybe a planet, maybe a cusp, whatever. And then what's touching that point? That's the transiting planet. So a planet can touch not just with its hands. A planet can touch with its eyes too. Don't forget that.
Aspect.
Just like our Bhagwan Sri Krishna, we hear that he can eat with his eyes.
Yeah.
Or he can do many things with his eyes, but back to transits. They can see with their eyes. They can touch with their eyes. So anyway, transits can also be effective by aspects, not just by the conjunction, but also by the aspect. Now, think more about this analogy. There's different kinds of spots There's pain spots on your body and there's pleasure spots on your body. Like there might be a boo-boo. You might have a black and blue. And then somebody comes along and touches that black and blue part and it goes, ow.
Yeah.
Right?
Very nicely explained. Yeah.
When you have the black and blue, it's not hurting that much. But when somebody comes and touches it,
yes,
that's when you feel it. Or if you have a nice part in your body, it's just hanging out there. But if somebody touches it, it feels great. So that's what transits do. You're born with a birth chart and you have these particular kind of spots in it. Like Ryan was saying, you have to know the birth chart to know what the transit's going to do. Because you have to know what kind of spots the person's got on their skin. A lot of painful spots, a lot of pleasurable spots, really bad boo-boos, really, that's going to make a total difference as to what the transits do to the person.
Now, let me just interrupt you. I just want to know, are you looking at from the ascendant, the boo-boos, or from the moon?
No, think carefully. Think carefully. It can be X-rated. What I'm saying, I got to comment whether it's X-rated. But I was waiting for you to do that, for you to say that. I was thinking more along the lines of boo-boos. But no, I'm not thinking about ascendant or anything. Think what I'm saying. Your chart is your chart.
Yeah.
So inside your chart, let's say you have Jupiter at 23 degrees Libra.
Yeah.
That's one of the spots on your body.
Okay.
When somebody touches that spot.
Yeah.
That's how that spot gets activated. Now, if that 23 degrees Libra Jupiter is really nice, then when somebody touches that spot, nice stuff is going to happen to you, hopefully. But another factor is the intention of the person touching. How do they touch? They might be touching you with a nail, or they may be touching you with a feather. So you have some gentle planets, Somya planets, very nice planets. They come, they touch you with a feather. Even if you have a boo-boo, when a nice person comes with a feather and touches it, it doesn't hurt. It feels better. Mm-hmm. When you have a nice benefic planet come over your messed up karma, it improves. But when you have a big tough guy like Saturn come around with his hammer and chisel and he hits on your points, even your good points start to hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's also the temporal conditions. The points in your chart define the sensitive points that are going to be touched, but also it's not the same throughout your life. There's temporal conditions as well, and that's how dashas intermix with transits. The dasha planets become more sensitive than they are at the times. So you were saying about what Ryan said in his video about in this dasha this transit does this thing, and another dasha it doesn't do that. And another thing is you never get the same transit twice.
Yeah.
You'll never, you don't, because all the planets aren't in the same thing. Okay, so let's see what else we got. A couple other important things. Now, another thing is, how close are you getting to the sensitive spot? That's an important point about transits. Now, Western astrologers, they talk about an orb of influence, an area. Michael, you were talking about that Navamsha space as being a sensitive area. Somehow or another, however you define it, there's a sensitive area where once you come within this distance of this spot, stuff starts to happen. So I myself like to just use the Prashari Sputa Drishti. It's just perfect. It's already including all this stuff with orbs and everything. You're just calculating the percentage of how intense this aspect is. And once the aspect gets above a certain level of intensity, you start to feel it. But then you also have an issue of and I'll let your imaginations run wild, but like if the toucher is getting closer to the sensitive spot, then it's sensitive from further away. But if he's moving away from the sensitive spot, do you know what I'm saying? Like if this is my sensitive spot and it's coming towards it, then the anticipation is coming, it's coming towards it. And if it's moving away, I forget about it a lot more fast because I know it's done. Yeah. So the orb of influence is actually skewed towards the approaching side.
Now, I know some astrologers say, well, I use 3-degree orb, or I use 5 degrees, or some say, well, 10 degrees orb. Is there like any truth to that, or just they all?
Everybody will pick something, but what I'm saying is we don't have to pick if we know about Sputa Drishti.
Okay.
You just calculate Sputa Drishti. Sputa Drishti means a Drishti by a degree.
Yeah.
And it's calculated in Virupas, or you just can do it in percentages. I translate it to percentages. So that's fine. So I bypass the whole need to define an orb. I just say, if the aspect is over 70%,
correct,
then I like it and I pay attention to it. A couple more things to say. How long is it being touched for?
Yeah.
That also makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, Sunilee, you were saying this, right? Right in the beginning, you were saying the slower moving planets. Those are the big players. But you know what's really cool is that except for Sun, Moon, Rahu, Ketu, the other guys, they all change their speeds all the time. And so that's the thing to watch out for. The difficult thing with transits is there's too many of them. Every day there's another one. There's just billions of them. And when you want to look and see when is this person going to get married or get in a car accident, it's hopeless.
Yeah. Exactly.
But one of the ways to narrow it down dramatically is forget about all the junk. Just look for the stations. Stations are where any planet, when in between it going direct and going retrograde, it's got to slow down, stop, and then turn around and then start speeding up the other direction. That period of time where it's switching from going direct to going retrograde, it is getting heavy. It's staying on one spot for a long time, even if it's Mercury. Mercury can sometimes make a transit count if it's right when it's stationing, because it'll sit there for a day or two or three or four. Now what to speak about Saturn? When you get Saturn stations, if a Saturn station lines up with something important in your chart, it's going to sit there for months. How much? I couldn't see the time.
Oh, it's 40 seconds.
Oh, God. Okay, no, actually, I'm good, actually. So how long? So the slower ones, are you definitely want to pay more attention to the slower ones, but especially when the stations and even the fast planets can station. So if you have a sensitive spot in your chart, by aspect or by conjunction, the transiting planet lines up with it and doesn't just rush over it, but stays there for a while, that's serious.
Okay.
And the last thing to say is, well, I also have some examples, but I'll save that for the next half.
Okay.
If you want. But the last thing to say is multiple touches.
Oh yeah, 2-3 planets coming and touching it.
Yeah, multiple touches.
Yeah.
So multiple touches, or when you touch each other, that's the best. So for example, if you have Saturn hitting Mars, natal Mars, and transiting Mars hitting natal Saturn,
okay,
big things go on then.
All right.
Look for things like that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
Joni, you're up. You're okay.
Okay, you got it?
Yeah.
Muted. Okay, wonderful. Well, Vic, I love what you said about the planet stationing, because that's everything to me. As a matter of fact, every year right before a year starts, I go through all of the new moon charts for the 12 months, because once I get a feeling and understand where all the transiting planets are going to be for that year, then I just plug it into every chart that I look at, because I make a note of all the planet stations. As a matter of fact, on my website, I have that because I teach all my students, make a list of the stations of the planets. And like you said, Mercury retrograde, I mean, the faster moving planets, they move too fast. I'm talking about Venus, Mercury, and Venus just went retrograde. And when a planet goes retrograde, it stays in a sign for a longer duration. Venus was in a sign for 4 months. It was exalted in Pisces. And when a planet goes retrograde and it's exalted, it can act like a debilitated planet. So we've got to remember when we're looking at transits, there's signs of exaltation, debilitation, because it really does make a difference. Another thing about transits, being an astrologer for 30 plus years, I've experienced all the transits through my own chart, what that feels like. Not just what you read about, but experiencing all of these transits really, it goes home to what you're going to be able to express to your clients. But of course, looking at the transits, I make note of all of the stations, particularly Saturn station. If you have somebody's chart that Saturn is sitting on their sun, their moon, for 2 to 3 months when it stations, you know what's going to be happening to that person. The major big players, of course, that I'm going to be looking at are the transits of Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu. So not only am I looking at the degrees that they station at and plugging them into every chart that I'm analyzing, I'm also looking at the eclipses, because there are 2 solar eclipses that will occur every year. And if a person has planets within 3-degree range of a solar eclipse, and remember, a solar eclipse is when the sun and moon come together within close to Rahu and Ketu. They happen 6 months apart, and they always happen in these opposing signs for 18 months. And when you're seeing these eclipses, you know that eclipses bring out things that have been hidden. And a great way to understand what hidden thing that is about to be revealed in your life is to, of course, to go back 18 years. A lot of your clients haven't been around that length of time, but to go back. And another thing is, when I'm looking at Jupiter's transit and I'm trying to figure out, what it will produce, I go back 12 years ago, what happened during this time? I know that there's other transits surrounding it and dashas that will change it up, but you will get a general feel of these transits if you can go back and understand what they produced before. Now, looking at this, once you know when the major hits are going to happen with the outer planets, once again, I'm looking at Jupiter, Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, and the eclipses. Eclipses are huge as a predictive astrologer. Then you're going to put in the triggers of the faster moving planets, because if you have Saturn aspecting a planet and Jupiter aspecting a planet, but then you have the faster moving planets come around, and I call them trigger by aspecting those long-standing transits, that's when things happen. That's my experience. So you're going to watch that. Now, another thing that I really key into, because I look at world predictions, I'm looking at what's going to be happening in the world by the transits. I look at where the transiting planets, the aspects that they're making to one another in the heavens, whether they're a square, a trine, and of course using the traditional Vedic aspects, the trines of Jupiter, the 310 of Saturn, the 4-8 of Mars. I look at that in the heavens and how they aspect one another, and then I just plug those into the individual's charts that I'm looking at, but to see what's happening in the sky. And also, I always include if these transits, because like last summer we had the Mars-Saturn conjunction, and there was the attack in Nice, and there was, all sorts of turbulent things that happened. But I also noted, of course, the sign they're in, of course, the fixed stars they may be conjunct, because, when they are coming together, Mars and Saturn exactly conjuncted in Scorpio. And so it was on Antares, Star of War. So you can see this. And of course, when it affects an individual's chart, I look at people that might have had a planet at 15 degrees of Scorpio, and I knew something happened. You can always go, wow, that was a hard time. And of course, depending on what house it's in, I do look at from the Lagna. That's a more personal ascendant. And then I make it relative to Chandra Lagna, the moon. But another cycle that's so important, and I think is so fascinating, is Mars, because Mars goes to the zodiac once every 2 years, but when it goes retrograde, note that every year it goes retrograde, it moves up a sign. And in this cyclic process, it will bring out, Mars is a huge trigger. So when you have long-standing transits and you have Mars come up and hit it, Mars always creates an event. It's action, it's energy, it's courage. So I always watch for, and I make predictions. For example, when Mars was in Virgo, I thought there would be all sorts of events occurring with health. And the Ebola thing happened like blocks from my house. I was like, man, this is like too close to home. But then also I want to talk about when I'm looking at these transits, I always look at the trinal aspect of Rahu and Ketu. And I know not everyone uses it, but this is the reason why I think the trinal aspect of Rahu and Ketu is so significant. Because remember, when a planet is in trine, it will be conjunct in the Navamsha, okay? And you know, I was looking at the transits for the first 3 days of June, and I'm noticing that Rahu is aspecting Venus, is trining it essentially right now, as well as, let me see, it's Ketu is aspecting Mars by trine. And if you pull up the Navamsha chart for the day, you will see Venus conjunct Rahu and Mars conjunct Ketu, and of course they're in opposition. And I have made some major world predictions based on where they all go in accordance to the Navamsha chart. And some people say in the Navamsha chart, you've got to convert the transiting planets to their Navamsha positions before you put them back in a birth chart. And you know, guys, there's a naughty technique where you can actually put the transiting planets without converting them in the Navamsha. And I've seen that work. So that's really interesting. Another thing is, with these transits, I just want to make note, when you're looking at a birth chart, of course, I think other people have mentioned this already, but it's so true that the transiting planets of your Mahadasha ruling planets, for example, if you're in Saturn Rahu, then those transits will be 10 times more important in your life experience at that time. They're the most. So in other words, if somebody has terrible transit and if they have terrible transits with Saturn, but they're in a Jupiter Mahadasha, Saturn won't be as bad because the transits of Jupiter are more important during that Dasha period. You see, so that's interesting. And one more thing, the natal planets of your chart, let's say you're in Saturn's Mahadasha, then when transiting planets aspect your natal Saturn, that will be far more significant, okay?
Okay.
That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. So, Joni, I just wanted to clear about what you said. When you were saying naughty techniques, I'm like, naughty techniques? I'm like, oh, naughty techniques, what are those?
You like that?
No, you said naughty transits, and I'm like, naughty transits, okay. I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about converting the birth transit to the Navamsha, you're not doing that. You're simply taking, if Rahu is in Leo, you're just putting that Leo in the Navamsha.
Exactly.
Okay. So not converting it to like the nakshatra and all that.
Right. Some astrologers feel like you have to convert them, but it's a naughty technique not to. And my teacher told me, do not put a transit in the Navamsha unless you take the Navamsha positions of the transits before you put it in. But I heard about this naughty technique, and I got to say, it works.
Okay, perfect. So Dr. Pai, take it over.
Thank you, Kapiel. I love this thing by Joni. She was talking about Nadi. And I'll be talking about some rules in Nadi and transit rules. It's beautiful. I love what even Vic Ji said and what even Sunilee Ji said. I think most of them, I'm just going to just address some of those things that I've learned from my teacher, Nadi teacher. And I want to give credit to the research work that we did 4 or 5 years ago, just using transits, nothing else. And he was a great proponent of using no dashas, nothing, just transits, pure transits, nadi transits. And it worked beautifully for us. And we have a lot of articles that we have also written, so you can read them up. But what I want to say is another great teacher who also taught me about transits is Professor A.B. Sundaram. So I'm going to talk about these two different concepts, Nadi, and then both are Nadi concepts, but I want to first clarify that the first question that Professor Sundaram asked me, and I mean, he was addressing to a workshop. He said, can you tell me the difference between what is Gochar and what is Grahachar? We all think, you know, every transit we say it's Gochar. But what is Grahachar? There are two concepts. These are two very, very important concepts which people have misunderstood. Okay, so let me explain what I've understood from them, you know, from Bhausab Sakulkar and from Professor A.V. Sundaram. And he beautifully puts it, he says, Gochar is always seen from the position with reference to natal moon only. That is Gochar. The second thing what he says is in Gochar, there is no aspect of planets for consideration. This is very, very key. He says no aspects have to be seen in Gochar. Gochar are the results of your karmas, of your natives from your past life. That's your prarabdha. And that's what you see in Gochar alone. So when somebody says that I'm going through a sadisati, it is not always that all sadisatis are going to be bad for everybody. It's like saying, you know, the reference that Sundaramji gave in the workshop, he says it's like an income tax rate which happens. If your account of your past lives are in order, then the income tax agents who are going to come and raid your house or whatever, they can't do anything about it because that is Shani. Because what Bhausab used to tell me, what is Shani? Shani, he says, he's like a limping postman or old postman. He comes with a post. And whenever he transits a house, he just drops the post into your letterbox. He doesn't know what is there in the post. That's his duty. And when you open up, that's your karmas, which are unfolding for you. That is what he's called a karma karaka, the significators of karma. And Shani, Bhausab used to say, always refers in transit to fate and karmas. And Jupiter in transit, he always says, refers to your, it is your destiny, or it's your, one is karmas, other is fate. So it's freedom. Yeah, that's the right word. He says Jupiter is freedom. So if you are going through, so when you're looking at moon, he says what A.B. Sundaramji says is, moon is to be seen for Gochar only because moon represents your vasanas. Vasanas means your karmic patterns and your inclinations. It's like a hard disk drive which has been inserted into your brain. That's your, you know, your moon, right? So that is what you see. And for Gochar Phal, again, you take into various considerations. But then what is Grahachar? Grahachar is movement of all planets with reference to a specific reference object. It could be a planet, right? So Grahachar is transit of all planets with respect to their natal position. So you would look at transit of Jupiter with respect to your natal Jupiter. You look at transit of Mercury from your natal Mercury. That is Grahachar. And in Grahachar, you take aspects of planets into consideration. So when you're talking about Gochar, Gochar is the result of the individual and Grahachar is a collective result, which, you know, people can, now what you have to do is when you do a transit analysis, application of using Nadi principles, what you do is you superimpose your natal chart with the Gochar, which gives you your moon transit, that is individual, and then you superimpose the Grahachar, where you take the aspects of planets relative to each other.
Wait, explain that again.
See,
about the superimposing part?
Yeah, you have your natal chart.
Yeah.
So on your natal chart, the first thing you have to do is superimpose the results of your analysis of a Gochar, which is only with respect to moon without any aspects. Okay. And then you superimpose on it the Grahachar analysis. So whatever common things come out, those are the things which, you know, they usually can signify.
Okay.
So Saturn is fate, Jupiter is free will. So whenever Jupiter transits into whichever house, it activates the free will of the house. Wherever Saturn transits, it's your destiny, it's your karmas. And wherever Rahu and Ketu, they are 100% karmic planets. Right? Ketu could be obstructive. Rahu could have both these qualities of even giving obstruction. At the same time, it can give you that push that you need. It can bring you, it can give you prominence. Right? So this is, and then we've done a lot of research. I've got some 15 rules that we had done over research. But I'm just going to talk about specific 6 rules only for career.
Okay.
These are very generic rules, right? There are many rules of Nadi that we talk about. For example, there is a rule which there is a great author called Mridula Trivedi, and she has given certain rules for Saturn transits. She says, when Saturn transits over your natal Mars and Mars transits over your natal Saturn, it can take the native very high, or it can bring the native very low. So that's the thing, she says. And you also, when you have Saturn transiting over your natal Mars, again, depending on other conditions, there's a caveat whenever I say this. You have to look at the chart in totality. Are the dashas, and all the strength of the planets, are these promising? It's like, the transits can actually give you a result or stop you from giving the results. They are indicators of time, right? So let me share my screen and let me show you some of the rules, which are very easy, very, very easy rules. And everybody would be able to see this. These are only career-related rules that I have here. Okay, can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. So now these are Nadi rules. These are very generic rules, but they work very, very, very well. I've seen this and I've tested it with Bahusab. There are 15 other rules but I'll talk about these first rules. First rule is timing of profession. Whenever Jupiter transits, when you see the arrow, these are Nadi transits. The arrow signifies trine. Okay? These are Nadi trines. So whenever Jupiter is transiting in trine to your natal, either over Saturn or in trines to Saturn, or when Saturn transits over your natal Jupiter or trines to your natal Jupiter, it can actually give important events, major life-changing events, sometimes more positive, because what is happening is you're getting fate and destiny, and free will coming together. They will actually help you because karmas are also unfolding and your free will is also. So this is the first rule of Nadi. The second rule of Nadi, progress and profession. Transit Saturn aspecting natal Jupiter plus. You see the plus sign there, which means if you have to time it really close, transit Saturn, transit Sun aspecting your natal Jupiter, which shows authority. If you want to show progress in your profession, it should involve Jupiter. Plus, there is another third condition. Whenever transit Moon, aspects natal Jupiter. When I'm talking about aspects, I'm talking about only Nadi aspects, that's trine aspects. So Moon is going to show you the change. So anybody who is going to move in profession, they're going to be elevated, they're going to change a location or something, in authority, all these 3 planets have to activate. This is the Nadi. Problem is in profession. Transit Saturn, aspecting natal Ketu. Always, I've seen this. And I'm talking about, these are trine, only trine aspects. And these are very generic, right? Quitting of a job. This is again a generic rule saying that in a chart, if you have, in the natal chart, if Mars and Ketu are somehow connected, I'm saying either by conjunct, by aspect, or by if the dispositors, and you have a transiting Saturn aspecting, that point of Mars and Ketu, then it will make the person want to quit his job. He will constantly feel problems in his, but there is a rider. There is a savior. The savior is transit Jupiter. This condition will not apply if transit Jupiter is aspecting this Mars and Ketu, okay, in the natal chart, then this condition will not operate because Jupiter comes and saves grace. Okay?
Okay.
Change in place in profession. transit Saturn, aspecting natal moon. So how many minutes? Oh, it won't pass. Okay, that's, or transit Saturn, 3rd or 7th from moon. Right? These are very generic, very generic. Job along with another job. This is another rule. If in a chart natal Venus and Mercury are conjoined, and then transit Saturn aspects this point, then you would see these have multiple profession, or they would have multiple businesses, or multiple jobs, or whatever. So these are some of the rules that I have come across just from a perspective of career or profession.
Perfect.
So,
I just wanted to quickly ask you, when you're telling about nadi aspects, or what do you mean by that? That they're always, you're not looking at the 3rd or 10th aspect of Saturn. It's just only,
only the 5th and 9th.
5th and 9th, and not over
159.
159. Okay, perfect.
Nadi is always 159.
159. Okay. What is it? Just nadi, or is there a name to this particular nadi? Like Dhruv Nadi or Buddha Nadi?
No, these are general Nadi rules that he has collected. This was, Bhau Saab is a Maharashtrian astrologer, a brilliant astrologer. He's gone very deep into Nadi. He's read many Nadis. And then he's come out, he's culled this out, and he says most of these techniques are what are used by palm readers. You have these, not the palm, I'm talking about the leaf, the palm leaf. The Nadi rules.
Yeah.
They just use these techniques to actually make a prediction. So
from the ascendant or the moon, or that superimposing they're doing?
They're doing superimposing. See, there are certain rules that you have to see from Lagna also, and Mahadasha Lord also. I'm not going deeper because of paucity of time. If I have to do, I can do a complete lesson on all these transit rules that I have, worked with him for over a year and a half.
Okay.
We've done some research on.
Perfect.
These are very basic rules, very basic. And you would see when you say Nadi aspects, if your natal, say for example, your natal Jupiter is at 15 degrees in any house. So whenever you have Saturn transiting in trine at 15 degrees or around 15 degrees in trine 159, then those active. It activates. It activates definitely.
Perfect.
It doesn't matter whether. But then you have to look whether the dashas are supporting. Sometimes the event, can happen. Sometimes, see, there are only 4 conditions always. The Nadi rules always say, it happens as per your expectation. It happens more than your expectation. It happens less than expectation, or it denies result.
Denies results. Okay.
So there are only 4 conditions in life.
Perfect. Yeah. That's true. Okay. So Dhilip Kumar ji, what do you think?
A lot has been said about the transits. So 2 or 3 topics that I wanted to speak on has been already spoken. So I marked, I just scratched them out on the notebook. And I'll just give some simple, tips on transit. One is that you can always connect the dasha and antardasha to the transit of planets. See, for example, a person goes through Rahu dasha and Guru antardasha. And this is Rahu's, Rahu and Jupiter together. And so if there's any way to connect Rahu and Jupiter in the sky, then an event can take place. See, for example, when Rahu comes to, Rahu sign, which is Aquarius, and in Aquarius there is a Jupiter zone, which is Pura Bhadrapada. So when Rahu comes there, it can trigger an event because already the Dasha and Antardasha, they have met. And so the same grahas, they meet in the sky, they can actually start this process. For example, when I was going through Rahu Dasha and Guru Antardasha, my marriage happened when Rahu was in Pura Bhadrapada of Kumbh Rashi. Example. So what you need to do is, you'll have to connect these, the Dasha and Antardasha planets and see if there are common points in the sky, and those points actually tend to become very sensitive for transits. And in this, the moon might be considered as the day indicator, and the month. Everyone knows that the sun moves once a month, so sun could be considered as a month indicator, and a year event can happen through Jupiter. So I think these three grahas can give us a great deal about the year, the month, and the day of the event. So there will be always some relationship. This is taken from a clue from Brihat Parashara Horashastra, where while I was reading the text on a very positive Mercury period, Mercury Dasha, Maharshi Parashara says that the event can take place on Wednesdays. So you see that even the day could be connected to the Dasha. So this is possible. So when transit happens, we have to keep an eye on the combinations possible. That you need to know which sign, which nakshatra, and almost you can keep them ready. And for any dasha, any antardasha, but you won't find this happening for every dasha and antardasha, because you don't have the sign and the nakshatra always coming in conjunction according to the dasha scheme. But in most cases it comes. So Mars dasha, for example, Mars dasha and Saturn antardasha. So what are the common points? You have Mars sign, two signs, and there is Anuradha, which is Saturn-Mars zone. So this is how you can connect. And in some cases, you may not find, you may not find a common point like this. That's one point. So this is one I always use in astrology, because there must be a relationship between the transit and the dasha and antardasha for anything to happen. So I always been telling my clients that if life is considered as a journey, and we are starting from one point and ending at what we call the destination, the destiny, there are three components. This one is the basic vehicle, and this vehicle is capable of such and such experiences. This could be the mind, body, soul complex, but that is one thing that has already been determined by the basic horoscope that we all got when we were born. And then as you go through the road, that becomes the dasha and antardasha. And I always compared the vehicles that you meet on the road to the the environment around you. Sometimes as you drive, you'll see an accident happening, and that's because the road and the car that you met, that together has worked. For example, you find that accidents always happening most probably in places where the roads are suddenly got narrow, or the roads have got different. So the road did have a connection to the event that happened, but you needed a vehicle to be there. And this vehicle could be considered as the planets in transit. I used to think that these are something like that, where you meet something else to cause an event. Otherwise, there's just the road alone and there's nobody in the road. Then it's quite a different experience. So this is one I used to always check. And then another point I used to use was, people before me have already said that, I always thought that the transit of planets, when you read the result, whatever text has been written for the moon transit, that should not be, superimposed on a lagna. For example, it is better not to mix Sade Sati, that is 7.5 years Saturn phase, which is usually when Saturn comes close to the moon. You can't use the same thing over Lagna and get this, the results, because you always feel that, people suddenly go through a different kind of experience in Sade Sati, which is always from the moon's point of view and not from the Lagna point of view. This is something that I've been always noticing. And the more number of clients at any given point in time, at least from my experience, I always felt that more number of people were going through Sade Sati when they came in for consultation. The reason was that they always had one statement saying that, life was not like this before. And when I did inquiry about, okay, well, over Lagna, did this happen? Then they always say that it was not like this. So this is one point. And another point is, when you read Ashtaka, when you read transit, it's always better to keep an eye on the Ashtaka Varga. for example, the Sarva Ashtaka Varga or Samudaya Ashtaka Varga, which has a 2-digit number in the charts. Easy ways to look at which house has got the lowest score. And in that lowest score, if it matches as a bad Saturn transit, like for example, the 8th house transit from the moon, or Sade, Satya, those kind of what they call terrible transits of Saturn. If it coincides with a extremely low score on Sarvashtaka Varga, even then you find the actual effect coming very strong to the person. And even the separate Ashtaka Varga for each planet, Saturn's Ashtaka Varga, if it is 0, I've always found that the Sade Sati really hurts. And another point is, when we read transits, we always keep assuming that the whole sign is considered wherever the moon is. And then, for example, even now, people think in India, they think that 7.5 year Saturn is over for, Tula Rashi people, that is Libra moon sign people. But if you look at it, Vishaka Nakshatra people are still going through the effect. Because if you say that moon is on this side of Vrishchika or Scorpio, and if you take an angular distance, because 3 signs constitute Sade Satya, and 30 is 90 degrees. Mm-hmm. Half of it will be 45. So you have to take the moon and put 45 degrees on either side to get the exact specific 7.5 year Saturn.
Okay.
This is one. And then Maharishi Parashara's text you find in volume 2, he gives us a beautiful idea on the Ashtaka in connection with the transits. There I think he uses this, you make the basic Ashtaka, the Bin Ashtaka of each planet. And let's take for Sun, for example, and Sun has a lot to do with father. And then you take, you do the Trikona Shodhana, and then Ekadipatya Shodhana, and then you get all that, reductions done.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of, calculations to be done. And finally, you get what is called the Shodhaya Pinda, which is Rashi Pinda and Graha Pinda, added together. And that one number is the standard number for, checking the transit of planets. Especially, he keeps telling throughout the chapter that if Saturn comes to this particular point, with reference to, there are some more formulas left in that. When Saturn comes to the trinal positions of this nakshatras or these rashis, something happens. And I tested it on many of my clients, including myself, and I found it's pretty close. Sometimes it may not be exact, but when Saturn comes to that place, it is giving certain kinds of events. Mm. So the technique that he has given there is, he says, take that number and say, let some 3-digit number is there. Oh, I come so fast. Okay. Some 3-digit number is there. And you take, divide it by 27, you get a remainder, and the remainder counted from Ashwini tells you in which star, when Saturn comes, there will be a problem connected to that. So all these methods could be used.
I had a quick question on that. Saturn doesn't distribute too many points.
Okay.
In Sarvashta Varga.
Yeah.
So, most of the time we're using the Binashtak in Binashtak Varga, it may not, it gets like maybe 1, 3, 4, 6. Do you pay attention to those 1s or 0s or 3s? Because I know below 8 is...
no, in Saturn's Ashtavarga, Binashtavarga, Saturn does not get in any sign 8. It gets maximum 7. Yeah. So you could usually you will find, very unforgettable negative events happening with usually 0 and 1.
Yeah, 0 and 1. Okay. Because I'm like, everybody has pretty much very low points through Saturn, so it can't.
No, if that coincides with 7.5 year Saturn. So I always tell my people, your 7.5 is not 7.5. It would be 2.5 or 5 or 7.5, depending upon if you got high scores in Samudaya Ashtavarga in 2 squares, 2 zodiacs, then maybe it is not affecting you there. And it's only affecting you at the point where it is at its lowest.
Lowest, okay.
Yeah. Perfect. And one more thing, I think Ryan did cover this point, that, for example, if you take Dr. K.N. Rao's chart, he has combinations of, being unmarried. and you find Mercury in the 12th and Ketu in the 12th, the 12th lord in the 12th, and all those combinations that keep a person without marriage. And for people like that, no transit is going to give marriage. That's a point to consider. This has been already stated by Sri Varahamira and Brihad Jataka, that if you find an event is not slated to happen, no transit can make that happen. These are the things that people will miss out during a general reading, because when we address a moon sign and make a video on it, the person who sees it, he might be having totally a different horoscope. And he'll say, astrology is all,
This is why when I do my monthly horoscope, I tell them, it's not going to affect like literally 80% of you. So here's my thing. So Eve, you wanted to go last all the time, so here's your last chance.
Thank you. First of all, everyone, wow. So much has been said and so much brilliance. Couldn't agree with Joni more about Mars. And Sunilee, I believe you had typed into the chat Drishti Ved, which is common in Sarvatobhadra Chakra, which I was going to prepare, but you had to excuse me. I've had such a turbulent month. So the fact that I even made it, I'm really grateful. So what I chose to speak about instead was the fact that transits, we often think of the planets. That's what we're referring to as the movement of planets. When you read a lot of the classical sources, I love that what Dhilip Kumarji said about everything, like even the day of the week, the tithi, everything's moving, everything's changing. This is nature, nothing is stagnant. So you'll read a lot in the Purans how, you'll see a certain nakshatra. I'm going to take Rohini here because we just had the new moon in Rohini, so I decided to do Rohini. We also had some interesting alignments around that moon. So Rohini, it's very auspicious. It's inauspicious, actually. They say if Rohini comes on a Wednesday. Okay, so there's these little things that you'll read through the Purans that you can even look at the nakshatra in the day. And Rohini, the transits through Rohini are very important. Each nakshatra, the moon always shows what's going to grow. To say it simply, we have the sun, who's Atma. We have moon, who's Manas. And then we have Mars, who's Deha. Okay, body, form. Fire always gives shape and form and definition, right? So you'll read in a lot of the Purans when Sun, Moon, and Mars come together. This is very specific, specifically in Mrigashira Nakshatra. Okay, so and sometimes it's Sun, Moon, and Jupiter, which is interesting. So you'll see that little change happen. So when you have Sun, who is said to be, if you read a lot of the stories of the births of the grahas, a lot of this is going to be different. You get little changes here and there according to which Puran you're reading or which classical source you're referring to. But the Sun in general, you'll hear in a lot of stories, was an essence of Lord Vishnu. Like he gave some, Narayan gave some of his life, and that's Atma, or that Sun. And that's the realm of the liberated souls, let's say the realm of the liberation. Then you have Moon, who is said to be essence of Brahma. Okay, through many of the stories of the essence of Brahma, he gave a boon to one of the Rishi's wives that he would come through her womb. And that was Moon, that was Chandra. And it makes sense, Manas and the creator, right? So, and then Mars we have as the child of Mahesh, of Lord Shiva, born from his tapas, born from the sweat that hits the ground, from his intense penance. So when these three come together, we also have the essence of the Trinity. And so you'll see a lot of times in these Purans, they'll talk about that it's a good time to pray for your ancestors. You have all the Atma, Manas, and body and the form lining up in one nakshatra. And Rohini and Mrigashira become very important for this. I think Rohini is interesting because you'll also see that when the moon would transit into Rohini during certain seasons, and I believe it's the June-July season that you hear most often, the astrologer would go out days in advance. I believe it's like the 8th I think it might be Shukla Paksha, I'd have to check that, but you go out way in advance, you worship Agni for 3 days. You do all these specific things, and then you wait and watch for the minute that that the moon enters Rohini. And from that, the astrologer would determine the welfare of the land for a year based on the omens surrounding that entry of the moon into Rohini. And we could ask it's a very important thing about Rohini. It's very much tied to the welfare of the land, very much. And that makes sense for anyone who studies nakshatras. You're going to instantly understand that. So any grahas transiting Rohini, they're very important. The other thing that I wanted to say about this was that whenever you get whenever you look at these older texts and you start thinking about the way they were observing the stars and the movements of the stars, it's very different than us sitting behind a program and doing all these calculations through a program. You'll see that a lot of these people, they're observing the sky. And so Yog Taras became important. The empowered star of any nakshatra. So whether someone uses sidereal or tropical zodiac is irrelevant. I mean, to me, I personally, I can't, I like the old school way, and a lot of that was just based on local space, which we might even see as primitive now, in some way, just to look up and see, which planet is aligned, like Joni had said, which I love, was Antares, like all of the nakshatras, all of those Yog Taras around the sidereal Scorpio, you get national security, right? All of them, whether you put them into Sagittarius or not, because Rashi's clearly is degrees. When you read the classical sources, it's clearly they were not looking at the sky and looking at the constellation. Constellations are usually nakshatras. So when you're looking at Rashi's, you are looking at 30 degrees. So this is where I have to say there's a lot of research that needs to be done, in my opinion. But when you're just looking at the Yog Taras, which are the empowered star of each nakshatra, then you do have, like, if you have Vishaka, Anuradha, and Jyeshta, Vishaka, the protector, the offense, the defense, right? Vishaka comes out of Kartikeya's body. So this already makes a lot of sense. Then you have Anuradha, the diplomat, Mitra. The negotiation takes place there. So you can see how all these are related to national security. Jyeshta, the authority of the nation, and all the secrets are in Jyeshta, all the intelligence, all of those hidden things that need the protection. So you can understand how when a planet like Mars or planets like Mars and Saturn go over these fixed stars there, then there's going to be things like that. So these are just little techniques. I encourage all people learning astrology just to start observing the sky, just to start watching these things instead of being so glued to a computer screen. Because you'll start actually also getting a different energy when you start if you meditate on the sun, if you meditate on the moon. The sun and the moon, they become different. It's not like just this thing in the sky with no consciousness and just a burning ball of fire becomes alive. Or it already is alive. You don't give it any authority to be alive, but it helps you connect with the fact that you're part of a whole. And these grahas are said to they are divine consciousness. This is not just like our science makes things so separate.
No, I get that. Especially when you talked about, I was thinking about you actually when I was actually studying this 2 nights ago. But actually, you know what? Go ahead. I'll talk later.
No. I'm so good.
Okay.
So I just wanted to.
Because your passion in nakshatra and Dr. Arjun Pai's passion in nakshatra kind of sparked this thing on me to study nakshatra by actually studying the physicalities of the actual constellation. Okay, so especially like if you look at the Buddhist void, it's a point in the sky, Buddhist void, where only like they said like what 2 or 3 galaxies are present in literally 300 million light year area. Okay, so that means a very empty space. That is where the nakshatra of Swati is. Swati is what? Space. Swati is freedom to roam around. So when I looked at just these things, and like especially if you look at what do you call, it's called Norma cluster. Norma cluster is a cluster where this dark force keeps sucking things in. That is where the Mula nakshatra is. And Mula is about roots, going deep. So this thing keeps sucking you in the deep end. So that's where I'm like, wow, if a planet is transiting over these actual sensitive point of these voids and this cluster, and where this pulsar might be in that particular nakshatra. So if that pulsar degree is literally, let's say, Kakshaya slot of, Saturn, okay, that's where some event has to occur. Not what the mythical story is saying, but what the actual event is happening. If there's a pulsar, a quasar in that particular point of the constellation and planet transits, maybe it's like less than half a degree of transit on there. That's what got me going with this.
Well, the stories are the truth, meaning that, you look at most ancient languages and there were some symbols, pictures, images. And then we have all these separate letters, Actually, I feel like it almost squashes the creative intelligence. The way that we're made to think right now is very much put inside of a box, a linear movement. And very few things in nature are linear like that. Most things have some kind of natural circular motion. Even most ancient cultures would have circular speech, So like indigenous people of this land of America, they often say that. They didn't close speech the same way that we do. And speech shows a lot about a culture. It shows a lot about a time period. So I think, when I often look at astrology, one of the things that I do have a few astronomy simulating programs, because I like to see the person's chart at the moment of their birth, just the horizon, what was above the horizon, what was out of view. You can tell that by looking at the chart, but you can see specifically by looking at the astronomy if a graha is exactly aligned with Aldebaran, which is the Yogdara for Rohini, or if a graha is directly aligned with Regulus, which is the Yogdara for Magha Nakshatra. So then you can understand the person's, the power that nakshatra might have. As a matter of fact, I even look at the zenith point a lot. Then the star that was directly above the person at the time of birth, without considering, even if there's not a graha there,
Wow, because it's directly over our head.
The Hira talks about these things, and he also talks about the Yogdaras coming up, the star coming up at the eastern horizon. He'll talk about these things. You just read some of them are almost so simple that you might miss them. We always also want to make things complex. Just look at what's in front of you. That's what I often, I just try to look at what's in front of me and unite with that instead of all these fantastical things. Like, I want to experience these things through meditation. If that's the way we're supposed to be doing it, then I want to experience it. I don't want to block off my head with trying to figure out all these things that I know are beyond me. I'm too stupid. I'm too ignorant of a person. I'm just not going to understand all these calculations. I can get them logically.
Yeah.
But when it really comes to sitting down in front of a person and getting a reading and what happens in that moment, change, and if you think of the movement, this whole thing is always moving, always in motion. And when you start contemplating it, you're contemplating the movement. The one thing we're guaranteed in life is change. We are guaranteed that. We can't avoid it. You try to make this life consistent. It won't work. Nothing about this body is consistent. Nothing about the mind is consistent. There might be a hidden force that is consistent, but it's not the apparent thing. Yeah. So for that, you have to go inside So I just, with transits, I just wanted to pull that forward of how you'll see, like Varahamihira talks a lot about, Varahamihira, sorry, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, talks a lot about these certain nakshatras. Like he talks about Swati, speaking of Swati, he talks a lot about Swati yoga. He talks about that, and he talks about Rohini yoga, and he talks about, that's what I was referring to with the astrologer going out and worshiping the sacred fire for 3 days. There's all these things, offerings to Varuna, offerings to Indra, offerings to Vayu, the blessed staff with the black flag, in which direction the wind is going to blow, and all these things were done, and we don't do these things as astrologers anymore, and we're missing out because our modern mind says they're primitive, perhaps.
Yeah.
We're missing out. We're missing out. Because that's the direct experience.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll close my mouth now.
So thank you guys. I know I don't want to take too much of your time. So thank you so much for coming. And, next month we'll pick some new subjects and, bring it to the world again. So thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, Kapiel.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.